The HOA Karen who called 911 on me for trespassing had no idea I owned the entire county, including her $1 million house. 3 squad cars came screaming up my dirt road at 7 a.m. Delilah Thornfield stepped out in designer heels, stabbing her manicured finger at me like I was public enemy number 1. "Officer, arrest him. He's illegally occupying HOA property." I was sitting in my grandfather's rocking chair with steam rising from my coffee mug, pine needles crunching under police boots. The sheriff looked mortified. In a small town like this, he knew me. I reached into my flannel pocket, unfolded a yellow document, and handed it over. "Sheriff, you might want to see this." His jaw dropped. It was the original 1890s land grant. Every acre she was standing on belonged to my family. Her precious subdivision had been built on her homestead. The diesel fumes couldn't hide Delilah's panic sweat as reality hit her. What would you do if someone tried to evict you from your own land? My name is Rex Caldwell, and I'm what you might call an old-school mountain man. Third-generation logger. I spent the last 20 years working oil rigs in Alaska, saving every penny. When my dad passed 2 years ago, I inherited the family cabin, a solid log structure my great-grandfather built in 1890 on original homestead land in Pineville County, Montana. The cabin sits on 40 acres of prime mountain real estate with a crystal-clear creek and enough timber to build a small town. It's been in our family for over a century, passed down through handshake deals and faded paper deeds. The smell of cedar logs and wood smoke was my childhood lullaby. The crunch of pine needles under bare feet, my summer soundtrack. While I was up in Alaska dodging polar bears and making bank, some fancy developers decided my quiet little valley was perfect for their luxury project. They built Alpine Vista Estates, a gated community where city folks pay $800,000 for the privilege of pretending they're mountain people. Then came Delilah Thornfield, mid-40s, former corporate lawyer from Seattle, drives a white Tesla that probably costs more than most people's houses. She moved here 3 years ago, bought the biggest house in the development, and immediately got herself elected HOA president. She treats that position like she's running for Supreme Court justice. Delilah has this thing about community standards and property values. What she really means is she can't stand the sight of locals who don't fit her Pinterest-perfect vision of mountain living. That condescending smile. The way she calls grown men sweetie. How she always mentions her law degree when disagreeing with you. My first real encounter with her happened on a Tuesday morning. I was splitting firewood behind my cabin when I heard heels clicking on my wooden porch. She stood there in a cream-colored business suit holding a clipboard like it was Excalibur. "Mr. Caldwell, I presume." She didn't wait for an answer. "I'm Delilah Thornfield, president of the Alpine Vista Homeowners Association. We need to discuss your property's compliance issues." I set down my axe and wiped the sweat from my forehead. "Ma'am, I appreciate the visit, but I'm not part of your HOA." Her laugh could have frozen the creek. "Oh, sweetie, I'm afraid that's where you're mistaken. Your little cabin sits right in the middle of our community. That makes you subject to our covenants and restrictions." She handed me a certified letter demanding $25,000 in mandatory improvements, new siding, approved paint colors, professional landscaping, the works. 30 days to comply or face daily $500 fines. The taste of well water, metallic and pure, couldn't wash the bitter flavor of injustice from my mouth. "Now listen here, Miss Thornfield, Dr. Thornfield," she corrected. I didn't spend 7 years in law school to be called Mississippi. I pulled out my grandfather's original survey map, yellowed with age but legally binding. "Ma'am, this property predates your development by 130 years. I'm not subject to any HOA." She barely glanced at it. "That old paperwork is irrelevant in today's legal environment. You'll comply with our standards, or we'll make sure you do." Her heels clicked away like a countdown timer. That night, I sat on my porch with a mason jar of grandfather's moonshine, watching the lights twinkle in those fancy houses below. General Patton, my bloodhound, sensed the tension and rested his massive head on my knee. The mountain air carried the scent of coming trouble. I didn't know it yet, but Delilah Thornfield had just declared war on the wrong mountain man. What she couldn't possibly understand was that my family didn't just build this cabin. We built this entire county. And some legal documents have a way of surfacing when you need them most. 3 days after a visit, I was enjoying my morning coffee when I spotted a convoy rolling up my driveway. County code enforcement, 3 inspectors with clipboards, measuring tapes, and official attitudes. Behind them, Delilah sat in her pristine Tesla, engine purring, watching through designer sunglasses. I invited the inspectors in for coffee and homemade jerky. While they poked around, I remembered something my grandfather used to say. When city lawyers come calling, you better know more law than they do. I'd spent hours at the county clerk's office learning that my cabin was a legally established, non-conforming use. Grandfather clauses protect old structures from modern regulations. I spread out my documentation, building permits from 1890, survey maps, legal precedents. Every regulation Delilah tried to use didn't apply to a cabin that predated them by 60 years. The lead inspector shook his head. Mr. Caldwell, your property is in full compliance, better maintained than most new construction. Through my kitchen window, I watched Delilah's face contort as they delivered the news. But she was far from finished. That afternoon, I returned from town to find her Tesla parked sideways across my driveway entrance, blocking all access. She rolled down her window with a smile that could freeze hell. "Oh, Rex, I'm so sorry. I was just checking our property boundaries. This area right here is technically HOA common space, according to our newest survey. My driveway had been worn smooth by 3 generations of Caldwell vehicles since 1923. She commissioned a brand new boundary survey that conveniently adjusted the lines to include my access road. For the next week, she made my life miserable with surgical precision. Her Tesla appeared at random times, always blocking something critical. She photographed violations with dedication. Firewood stacked too high, my truck parked at the wrong angle, General Patton relieving himself on what she claimed was sacred HOA grass. She even called the local newspaper herself. The headline read, "Concerned citizen fights to maintain community standards." She painted me as a hillbilly holdout, threatening everyone's property values. Then something beautiful happened. The Old Mountain family started appearing at my door with casseroles, offers of help, and their own horror stories. The community split clean down the middle. Delilah's wealthy supporters versus everyone who just wanted to live without HOA tyranny. General Patton developed an uncanny ability to detect her Tesla from 3 blocks away and waddle over to Marcus territory on her pristine white walls every morning like clockwork. 2 weeks later, she pulled out the heavy artillery. She called an emergency HOA meeting with County Commissioner Bradley Hicks and Fire Marshal Tom Rodriguez. The community center was packed, tension thick as mountain fog. Delilah stood at the podium in her glowing white blazer. "We're here tonight because a dangerous structure threatens our entire community's safety and property values." She clicked through a PowerPoint of photos of my cabin with arrows pointing at imaginary deficiencies. "This ramshackle building violates 17 separate safety codes. I'm formally requesting that Commissioner Hicks condemn this property as a public nuisance." I approached the podium carrying 3 manila folders. "Commissioner, I appreciate Ms. Thornfield's creative interpretation of building safety." I opened the first folder, but I think you'll find this structural engineer's report interesting. The certified report declared my cabin sound enough to survive another century. Fire Marshal Rodriguez examined the documents. "Your property actually exceeds current fire safety standards." Delilah's mask slipped. "This isn't about safety anymore. It's about preserving the character of our investment. That cabin is an eyesore that affects everyone's property values. Mr. Caldwell needs to either upgrade or sell to someone who will." The room erupted in murmurs. This wasn't about standards. It was a land grab. Over the next few days, she launched coordinated harassment. Noise complaints about my morning wood chopping filed daily at 7:01 a.m., 1 minute after the legal noise ordinance allowed it. But rural properties like mine are typically exempt for agricultural activities. I turned her harassment into community building. Every morning when I split firewood, I invited neighbors to come grab free logs. Soon I had family showing up, Jake Morrison bringing his teenage son, Sarah Avery bringing muffins. Even some newer residents joined, drawn by genuine community spirit. Then a black sedan pulled up. A private investigator stepped out. Rex Caldwell, name's Dennis Polk, conducting a routine background investigation. Behind him, Delilah watched from her Tesla. 2 days later, legal papers arrived, a lawsuit claiming property boundary disputes, demanding $50,000 in legal fees and 3 years of back HOA assessments. That's when I visited Ephraim Jacobs, the 78-year-old surveyor who'd mapped half of Montana. He pulled out an 1890s territorial survey map. My jaw dropped. The original Caldwell homestead wasn't just 40 acres. It encompassed nearly 400 acres, including half of what was now Alpine Vista Estates. My ancestors had retained mineral and water rights on every sale. Every fancy house in Alpine Vista was built over subsurface rights that still belonged to me. I spent the next week at the county courthouse digging through deed records. The beauty of it was breathtaking. Delilah had researched surface laws, but missed the underground legal foundation that could bring her development crashing down. The bombshell came at the county clerk's office. Margaret Peterson pulled out a leather-bound ledger from the 1920s. "Rex, honey, you might want to sit down." There, in my great-grandfather's handwriting, was a land grant document. Not 400 acres. The entire Pineville County territory, all 12,000 acres. My great-grandfather had been territorial land commissioner in 1889. When Montana achieved statehood, he was granted the section as payment. Every property deed in the county contained retained mineral, water, and subsurface usage clauses. I could shut off their water supply tomorrow if I wanted, or demand compensation from every property owner. The moral weight crushed down on me. 3 generations of Caldwells had chosen community harmony over personal profit. I started making phone calls. Sarah Blackwood, an environmental lawyer, suggested a community land trust. Dr. Ruby Sterling, a conservation biologist, discovered endangered species on my land: northern bog lemmings, grizzly bear corridors, old-growth forest. Harold Finch, the local banker, ran the numbers. We hammered out the Pineville County Conservation Trust. The trust would own the land cooperatively while residents owned their homes. My water and mineral rights would become the trust's foundational assets. We'd preserve 8,000 acres as protected wilderness, allow sustainable development on the rest, and create democratic governance. No more HOA dictatorship. Delilah sensed something shifting. She organized a community safety patrol to spy on me, convinced board members to file a restraining order, contacted the state environmental agency, claiming my cabin was polluting the water supply. The tests came back showing my land actually improved groundwater quality for the entire valley. Her final act came when she tried to bribe Commissioner Hicks with a $50,000 campaign contribution to condemn my property. The FBI's Public Corruption Unit had already been watching. She hired Mountain Property Solutions, a predatory HOA management company under federal investigation for racketeering. She scheduled an emergency community safety meeting with media invitations, planning to destroy my reputation. What she didn't know was that I'd scheduled my own presentation for the same meeting. Federal wildlife agents would be there. The community land trust paperwork was filed. The conservation easement was approved. The Pineville County Community Center had never seen a crowd like this. Every chair occupied, people lined the walls, TV crews ready. Delilah entered like a prosecuting attorney, gave her dramatic PowerPoint performance, called me a threat to civilized standards, and demanded condemnation. I stood up slowly, boots echoing. Ms. Thornfield has raised interesting points about property rights. But before we discuss her concerns, everyone should know who actually owns the land we're talking about. I pulled out the territorial land grant. This is the original 1889 grant that established the Caldwell homestead. Not 40 acres, but the entire Pineville County territory, all 12,000 acres. Every property deed in Alpine Vista contains retained mineral and water rights clauses. Delilah jumped up. "That's impossible. You researched surface property law, ma'am." You missed the subsurface rights that could shut off your water supply tomorrow. But I'm not here to punish anyone, I continued. I'm here to offer something better. I gestured to Sarah, Ruby, and Harold. The Pineville County Conservation Trust, a community land trust that preserves 8,000 acres as wilderness while giving residents democratic control, ending HOA tyranny forever. The standing ovation started with the Old Mountain families and spread like wildfire. Then FBI agent Patricia Morrison approached. Miss Thornfield, you're under arrest for attempted bribery of a public official. 30 days later, the entire valley gathered at my cabin for the Great Decision Barbecue. The final tally, 87% approval for the trust. Property values stabilized. Housing costs dropped for families who joined. Federal grants funded trails and education centers. Sustainable tourism created 47 permanent jobs. Delilah's downfall became a cautionary tale. Federal charges cost her law license. She got 2 years probation and community service. Her mansion sold at a loss to a young teacher's family who planted vegetables in the front yard. The annual Pineville Freedom Festival became our signature celebration. Local crafts, environmental education, bluegrass music echoing off granite ridges. Legal scholars study our transition as a model. The Caldwell Doctrine became shorthand for using inherited rights to benefit entire communities. Every evening I sit on the porch my great-grandfather built, watching chimney smoke rise throughout the valley as families gather in homes they truly own. General Patton snores contentedly, his daily Tesla-marking duties long retired. Sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't destroying enemies. It's proving that cooperation defeats corruption, quiet competence outlasts loud aggression, and communities are strongest when built on shared values rather than shared fears. The mountain air carries children's laughter, the smell of home-cooked dinners, and the promise that tomorrow will be better because we chose to work together instead of tear each other apart. That's what real victory feels like. Not defeating someone, but lifting everyone. So tell me your worst HOA nightmare. Where are you watching from? I love hearing from folks who believe neighbors should be allies, not enemies.